There's a point when many women in midlife realize they've stopped saying what they need, not because they don't care, but because staying quiet feels easier than risking tension. Nothing is falling apart, yet something feels off and the distance keeps growing. In today's episode, I'm joined by therapist and author Colette Fair to explore why this happens so often in midlife, what it quietly costs women in energy, confidence, and connection, and how silence slowly becomes a habit. We talk about practical ways to speak up without blame, escalation, or drama. Using your voice feels steady and doable, not risky. And here's the question this conversation leaves you with. If keeping the peace has required you to keep shrinking, what is that silence really costing you? If you've been telling yourself it's fine, but deep down you know something needs to change, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Pursue Your Spark podcast, and I'm your host, Heike Yates. This is a show for the in-between seasons of midlife, where we uncover the habits and comfort zones keeping you stuck and move you towards strength and action without forcing a reinvention. Hey, everybody. I'd love to welcome our guest today, and that's Sue Willoughby on the show. Welcome to the show, Sue.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here today. And I loved our little preamble that we were just having.
I know I had to hit a start. I was like, stop. We have a podcast to do. We can't just keep chit-chatting.
Right. I do the same thing on my show where we're having this great conversation. I'm like, we should have had that on tape. We should have recorded that.
I got to get moving because I have nap time later on.
Right. Exactly.
So, Sue, you often say midlife isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. What is happening internally for women at this stage that makes it such a powerful turning point?
That is an excellent question. I think when we reach a certain age, some of us start to feel invisible. Some of us are unclear about an identity that we had previously that doesn't fit us anymore, whether it's the kids have moved out or a career change, or we're at a pinnacle, we're at a spot in our career where it's a plateau, whatever it is, we've become so attached to that identity that we don't know who we are without that. And I think that is sort of a pivotal point when we start to question those things, like, what am I going to do now? If you're getting at the point where you're retiring, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. What am I going to do? Sit on the couch and eat bonbons and watch soap operas, right? Turn into my grandmother or something. So it's a really good time to start that questioning process, start that curiosity process, and start building awareness around what's bubbling up for you. So I think that's, to me, really important that we notice when these things start to surface, when these questions come up, when we feel stuck, when we're like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to change this. I don't know how to have fun. So there's so many things that come up when we reach a certain point in our life.
We're going to dig a little deeper into that one, but that leads directly to yourself. You lived so many lives being attached to things, DJ, comic, and all kinds of other things. Tell us a little bit about your background and which part of your story do women connect with the most? And why do you think it hits home for them? So go for it.
Okay, good. Well, let's see. I think that growing up in an alcoholic household with a single mom, my parents split when I was younger. So I ended up living with my mom, and she had a drinking problem. And I never kind of knew what I was going to get. So it made me be really independent and try and figure out how to solve problems for myself, because I couldn't always count on adult supervision. Now, I was not unsupervised, but sometimes I just kind of never knew what I was going to walk into. So it kind of made me a couple of things. It made me really independent. It also made me be very protective of myself and very kind of shut off in a way that I don't want to get hurt. I don't know what you're going to bring to the table, so I'm going to, maybe push you away. But it also made me really curious, because I'm like, well, I'm kind of out here on my own. I'm going to figure things out for myself. So let's throw some spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks, see what doesn't. And I think I was an only child. So I think that just also added to that curiosity. I was on auto amuse a lot of the time. And I still am. I'm really good when I'm by myself because I don't ever get bored. I was always getting into things and sometimes not always making the best choices, but I was always experimenting and trying new things. So I think that I always had this sense of adventure. I was drawn to horses very early on, and I loved just spending time with them. I grew up in upstate New York, and I would, have my mother take me to the barn in 3 feet of snow. I didn't care. I just wanted to be around the horses and be in their presence and just get on and ride. I would just get on any horse and go off into the woods. And it didn't, it felt good to me. And it was very nurturing to my nervous system. I didn't understand in that language back then what was happening. But I was always trying new stuff. I was always just curious. I would take things apart. Quick story. After my parents split, I needed braces very badly. And my father didn't want to pay for them. So he asked me, the kid, what would you like? Would you like a motorcycle or would you like braces? Let me just answer that by saying I did not get braces until I was 60. So I got the motorcycle, much to my mother's disappointment. And she came home one day and I had it completely taken apart in the living room and the chain was soaking in a bucket of gasoline. So I just kind of did my own thing always. And I think that I've just continued to live my life that way. If something piqued my interest, I would explore whatever that was and go all in, whether it was someone gave me an introductory flight lesson. I went all in. I got my private pilot's license. I bought a plane. I mean, I kind of do things to the extreme. But here's the other thing. If things run their course, I let them go. And I think a lot of times in midlife or in any point in life, when people want to try something new, they feel like they have to become that expert and then just do it forever. You don't have to do that. So I think that the way that I go about my explorative adventures, that informs people that, hey, I don't have to I can try something. And if I don't like it, I don't have to do it, which is really a fun way to go through life. I don't have very many things on my bucket list because I've done a lot of things. Like you mentioned, I was a roller derby ref. I was a bartender and a DJ, and I've driven in demolition derbies, and I've been a pilot. I've jumped out of plane. You know what I mean? So
no, we don't know what you mean because the listener is saying, holy smokes,
like,
what? Who's she having on the show today?
Crazy person, ADHD.
No, I think it's not crazy, but I like to hook that experience that you're sharing, that you're going, find something interesting, going all in with people say, do it even if you have fear, or do it with fear, which I don't prescribe to in that setting. Because I was like, if I'm afraid of something, why the heck would I do it? Mm-hmm. But that also prevents us oftentimes from trying new things. But where I really want to go with this question is the first question I asked you when we are identifying with something and then we're transitioning forward. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, including myself, we have a problem to letting go. I was a runner for a long time. And when 3 years ago, I had to give up running, and I identified myself as I'm a marathon runner. I run ultra marathons. I'm a triathlete. I'm an Iron woman. I did all these things. And suddenly that identity is stripped away. How would you say, from your perspective, is there a transition for you? Or is this just, I'm done, I'm moving on to the next one?
Well, that's a good question because, like you said, you were very much wrapped up in your identity as that, I will say, extreme athlete. But yes, I mean, ultra marathons and Iron person competitions is no joke. I've done a couple of things similar to that. But when you shed that identity, it's almost like a lobster, for example, right? The lobster molts, and its crusty exterior is now gone, and it is this soft, squishy, vulnerable thing until their new shell comes back. And during that time, when you're the squishy, vulnerable creature, vulnerability is huge, and fear comes up. And what am I going to do next? And what if somebody eats me in the process? What am I going to do? All right, it might not be that extreme for us humans.
We just went to Maine this year. My husband ate for the first time lobster pound, so he did the whole lobster thing. Yes. That's just popped into my head.
As a kid, I can remember being in Maine camping and sitting in the back seat with a box of live lobsters and being scared out of my mind. But so when we're in that vulnerable state, it does bring up all of that fear comes up. So we forget that we have like all of that skill and all of those things that you did in your past. Maybe how can you transform them, like bring them forward in a way that it's not your full identity, but maybe it helps you create something new, or it informs your next decision in some way. So there's a transition period when you're the soft, squishy lobster without a shell. And then as you start to get more confidence in what you're exploring for your next phase, right? Your shell starts to get a little harder, and you start to get a little bit more confidence, and you start to be like, okay, I can do this. I can move forward. I can take that little baby step. I can take that next step. I think part of it is you didn't become an ultra marathoner overnight. It was a process. You started out training, you probably did, some 5Ks, and then you worked your way up, and it didn't happen overnight, right? It was a process. So I think if we can break those things down and say, okay, that was my identity before. Is there any piece of that I can use moving forward, and look at the possibilities that I can explore? It's all about exploration and curiosity and building awareness, and then taking small steps to, once again, start building up to something. You don't have to just go off the high dive into the big pool.
So give us an example from your own life.
Okay. So this is kind of an athletic story. I was never an athlete growing up. I quit high school twice. Well, the second time I quit, it was because I needed 4 years of gym credits, because I always skipped gym. I hated it. Part of the thing that I hated was putting on those stupid little outfits and just doing stupid, weird things that they wanted us to do. I didn't like it. So it was never I was not drawn, even though they tried to recruit me for crew because of my size. I'm 5'10". They're like, yeah, you need to be on the crew team. I was like, nah, it's too much like work. Later in life, I met someone. I went back to school and I met someone in one of my classes that said, hey, would you like to do a bike ride with me? I'm like, I got a bike. I could do that. The bike ride that they were recruiting me for was the California AIDS ride, which is 7 days. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's from 7 days from San Francisco to LA. I was like, God. What? Yeah. And it's a fundraiser. I was like, well, I don't know. So I had never done that before. And it just seemed like, I was like, okay, I'll do it, because I didn't really understand what was involved. But as an athlete, there's a lot of training involved. But we started out, the longest I'd ever ridden my bike was, a couple of miles around the park or whatever. Fortunately, this person that wanted me to do this ride with them had done all those things, had been a marathon runner, had been a, sort of an elite athlete. So I had a good trainer. That did not keep me from being in tears on an 80-mile bike ride in 45-degree weather while it was raining. But I did have that encouragement that I had a goal that I wanted to meet, that to be able to move forward. And so I think having an accountability partner helps. Just knowing that it's a process. I had to build up to this ride, which was significant. It was a lot. We rode upwards 50, 60, 70, 100 miles a day. in really hot weather or whatever. And then we camped at night. So it wasn't like we were staying in a cushy hotel room. So that was one of those things that was a really big change for me that I challenged myself with. And I finished the ride. I mean, I wasn't the fastest, or it wasn't a race. It was just a ride. But breaking it down, taking it step by step, slowly building up to be able to sustain 7 days of constant riding, in conditions that I wasn't used to. And it was a major accomplishment for me.
So what kept you at it? Because I know a lot of people setting goals and they're saying, hey, I'm going to cook this recipe. I'm going to finish knitting this pullover, just to go into territory that's not, sounds like an audacious goal for so many, like right. The examples we used. What kept you going? It's hard. Your butt hurts. The legs are tired. You're sleeping in a tent. It's raining. You're cold. Your toes are numb. I'm a bicyclist, so I know what it feels like. And some of the listeners may feel too. So what kept you going?
Well, in the training portion of it, which, like I said, I live in the Pacific Northwest. So we started training in February. And the ride was, I believe, in June in California. So the weather was very different. So having a partner to go through the training with, and somebody encouraged me, like I would wake up on a Saturday morning and I knew we had a long ride ahead of us and I would hear the rain outside and I was like hiding under my covers. And then the phone would ring and I'm like, please cancel, please cancel. And they're like, okay, are you ready for the ride? And I'm like, oh. I noticed changes in my body and I got to a point where I was like, I feel pretty good about this. Yes, it can be painful at times, but I feel accomplished. I feel like I'm getting energy from this. I see positive changes in my body, in my mind, in my attitude. And those are the kinds of things that keep you going. On the ride, it was different because, sometimes there was just a really long hill. It would be like a few miles long and you're just slogging up and down. There were people on the ride. I mean, it was the AIDS ride. And so there were people that were kind of flamboyant and doing some funny things. And there were some people that would like ride down the hill and then ride back up to encourage all the other riders. Or you would see somebody else who was struggling and you could support them as well. And I've done that on other rides, since then. But you're not alone, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Even if you feel like you are alone, you're not. You could be in a group of people or there's somebody else out there going through a similar struggle. So if you can connect in a community or in some sort of supportive system, you can get the encouragement that way. But also start to think about your own body, your own mind, how you're feeling, what are you experiencing? Those are the kinds of things that will keep you moving forward.
Let me ask you something. Why is it so hard to stay consistent even when you're trying? You start strong, you mean to keep going, and then life gets busy and it all falls apart. It is not a discipline problem. You're trying to follow plans that no longer fit your life. And if it doesn't fit your life, it won't stick. What you need is a way to build momentum that actually works for you. And the way we do this is probably not what you expect. That's exactly what I help you do inside the Pursue Your Spark Blueprint. With weekly momentum calls, you have support every step of the way. You can join anytime. And if this is hitting a little too close to home, it might be time to do something about it. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you to check out the blueprint. Let's pivot just a slightly. You've talked about how deeply conditioned midlife women are, staying agreeable, the good girl syndrome, accommodating, and endlessly resilient. We're always resilient. What do you see this conditioning costing women emotionally, physically, and spiritually?
Yes. Great question. I see it affecting women in all of those areas because, and I used to be a people pleaser myself, and a lot of that came from not having very high self-esteem. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I deserved certain things or whatever. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knew I was there to help. I'm going to say yes to everything because I want to be supportive and I want to do this. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So you may say yes to everything because you think it's going to make you look like, the amazing helper person or whatever it is. And all it's going to do is wear you down, because I would say yes to things. And then when it would come time to do the thing, I didn't want to do it. And then I would feel resentful. And then that made me feel icky inside. So if we are saying yes to everybody else and no to ourselves, we are not going to have any internal resources to actually do things. And I feel like we women especially, we tend to be caregivers. We tend to be more empathetic. We tend to, want to make other people feel good. Well, what about us? And when I started to realize that I could take care of myself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it made me a stronger person and gave me more energy to then help the people around me that needed it. And also, I didn't have to say yes to every single thing. Mm-hmm. So the things that I did say yes to are the things that I felt most aligned with, the people that I felt most aligned with, energetically, spiritually, emotionally. And I didn't feel bad about saying no to something that would just make me feel crappy later on, and that I wouldn't be into it with my whole self. When I do connect with something or a person or an event or whatever, it's because I feel it in my heart and I feel it in my soul.
Give us an example.
I'm very aligned with horses and
yeah.
working with them in my coaching practice. And I recently, about a year ago, I guess, less than that, maybe, in my awareness, I found out about a film called Rescued Hearts. And it's a documentary about the healing power of horses with humans and the connection between horses and humans. And it was a beautiful documentary. And I reached out to the documentarians, Dana Krashear and Christiana Sexton. And I said, hey, I would love to have you on my podcast because this is the kind of work I do. It really resonates with me. And that was kind of the start of a beautiful friendship between us. I was so impressed with the heart and the love and the light that they were putting out there into the community through the message of this documentary that I went down to Santa Barbara when they had their world premiere, and we've just stayed connected. And it's that kind of connection because that's something that resonates with me. It's the work that I do. I see how this kind of work affects people and changes their lives. And this film is just such a beautiful movement. It's not just a film, that I was drawn to that. So that's a really good example of listening to your heart and being drawn to connections that are, that fill your soul.
Yeah. But you took it one step further, if I remember correctly. You have your own horse now.
Yes, I've had my own horse for a while. And I've also, the coaching that I do is not only just with my horse, but I can do it with any horses. And sometimes I do retreats at other ranches with other coaches. And, but yes, I do have my own horse. His name is Moose because he's about that big.
No, I want to learn a little bit more about the practice you do with the horses that we haven't addressed yet. And I think it ties in beautifully with what our topic is about, the good girl syndrome, the not following the rules, doing what you're meant to do, and finding something that really resonates with your heart. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about that practice that you do, Sue.
Yes, Equus coaching is not therapeutic riding. There are many therapeutic riding programs out there, and I have volunteered at some, and that's a different modality. The work that I do is all on the ground, and the client will interact with the horse, and the horse is free to roam around the arena or the space in which we're working. It could be out in a field, could be in the pasture. They're free to do whatever they want. They're free to be a horse. So there's no training involved. It's not performative that way. And the client will interact with the horse however they are called to interact with them. It could be maybe they're, incorporating some movement with the horse. Maybe they're just approaching the horse and connecting with the horse on some level. It's about how you connect in relationship. And there's a big heart connection coming, from the horse. Horses are prey animals, and they are also herd animals. So they use all of their senses all of the time, every cell in their body, to take in information, process it, because it may inform their survival, right? If there's taking some information and they feel like they're in danger, they may either flee or fight, right? Fight or flight. So when they're working with us, we are part of their herd. So they're assessing what they're getting from us, what they're seeing and feeling inside. So our heart rate, our nervous system, they can sense if we're being congruent or not. So if there are outsides, and let's face it, we all have a little facade that we go through life with, some people more than others, they may put up a big wall. The horse can sense through that, and they can understand and feel if we are being congruent, if we're being true to ourselves. So it really does allow the person to get grounded, get back in their body, be in the moment, because horses are always in the moment. They just have to be. That's how they go through life. It's bred into them. I mean, it's just it's part of their DNA is that they have to sense everything to see if they're safe or not, and for survival. And we can learn a lot from the horse. So I am partnering with the horse to observe their body language, their behaviors, how they're interacting with the person, to see what's going on. Are they staying away from the person? Are they testing the person's boundaries, maybe? Whatever it is, I'm sensing and watching their behavior, and I'm also looking and listening to the person and how they're interacting with the horse to then ask some really informed coaching questions. So it's really a remarkable process. And sometimes things can happen very quickly, where even if somebody comes in with an agenda and they're like, well, I can do this thing. And then quickly they realize, and this happened to me when I was in my training program, it's not about the horse. It's not about getting the horse to do something. It's about the process. It's how you show up in that relationship, and how you show up one place is how you show up everywhere. So it's really, it's a lot quicker than talk coaching or talk therapy or something like that, because you can run your mouth pretty well and tell somebody what they want to hear. But when you've got a 1,200-pound animal staring you in the face, stuff gets real pretty quickly.
In my coaching as a Pilates coach, I've worked with several equestrians, and they've told me that after they got in touch with their feelings, their body, their connection, once they were riding their horses, they had a way better relationship with their horse. And it was almost like you described it. The horse was not listening to them, but it was intuitively, they became one, that they had very little guiding to do in their riding. And they credited it all to Pilates and the process that they went through to learn Pilates, to absorb the philosophy of Pilates and relay it with their horse. So that's why I wanted to definitely tie into that story, because I remember that from my coaching, that this is really was an aha moment for me as well.
Yeah, we forget that we have a body because we live in our heads all the time. We forget that there's this whole thing that has stored a lot of information from our lives, whether it's trauma, whether it, everything that we've been through is stored in there somewhere. And when you can start to build an awareness of what you're feeling in your body and how it relates to how you're reacting to someone or some situation, you can take that beat and say, okay, where is this coming from? Where do I feel this? And then you can start to recognize those body sensations. Like if you are in a situation where you feel threatened, you might feel tightness in your chest or, butterflies in your, whatever it is, you start to recognize, how is my body reacting? Not, what's going on in my head.
Yeah. Do you think midlife women stay stuck because it feels safer to play small than to actually be happy?
Yes, I do.
That's simple as that. So what can we do about it? No, I know. I was like, this is a yes or no question, but that
Yes,
leads me
and.
to the next. Yes, and a lot of women in midlife have also spent decades shrinking themselves to keep the peace. What are some practical, everyday ways they can begin practicing being visible again without blowing up their whole life? Because I think a lot of women are afraid if I say something, all hell breaks loose.
Mm-hmm. Once again, I'm going to go back to the body, and that to your last point, if I say something, so if you're in a situation and yes, I think women play small, don't want to express their true feelings. And a lot of that might be because they don't know how, in a way that you also have to understand that if you're expressing yourself in a heartfelt sense and you're just being honest with this, I feel this way, it's not about the other person. The difference between if you say, you're making me feel whatever, nobody's making you feel anything. It's, I feel this way and I don't, I'm just telling you what it is. All you can do, the only thing that you have responsibility for is how you feel. If you're worrying about how the other person is going to respond, then you are going to temper your feelings to meet your expectation of how you think they're going to react. That's exhausting when you think about it. And I'm not saying that you just go out there to hurt people's feelings, but if you can build that awareness of your body, the things that are coming up for you, start being curious about, where did that come from? Why am I reacting that way? Why do I feel that uncomfortable? Why is this situation making me feel uncomfortable? And take a breath before you respond. You're going to respond in a much more responsible manner that honors your feelings and doesn't offend the other person. If someone takes what you're saying personally, then they are receiving it and that they own that piece of it. You don't own that piece of it. So if you let go of the fact that the only thing that you really own is your truth, they're going to have their own truth. And if they react a certain way, then that is how they're going to react. You can't control that.
I don't know. I hope it helps my listener. Since you're my guest.
Yeah.
I'm just was thinking of how hard that is to do for so many women. We have been, and I recorded an episode for my show today, and I talk a little bit about this, how conditioned we are to not step up, to not ask for the promotion, to not to keep the quiet in the family, to not speak up for our own needs, to be the good girl, as you always talk about. It's what could be one thing that you think of that, or two or three, give me as many as you can think of, things that you can think of from your own experience, because that makes it so much more valuable for the listener to hear. What would Sue do? I haven't thought about that. What would Sue do?
What would Sue do?
Keep that. You can have that.
Right.
What would you do? We all have our experiences and we all approach things very differently. And I think I have the feeling we're very aligned with our spontaneity, with our adventurism, with our curiosity, but also with being direct. You strike me as being very direct. And I'm told I'm very direct to the point of people going, whoa. But what is it from your side? What is it that you would say?
In my life, I think my pendulum has swung in a lot of different directions. So from the direction of not being direct or being passive aggressive, I think a lot of women kind of fall in that category where you say something in such a way that you're trying to temper it in a way that it's like, I'm trying to be soft and trying to be kind, but that behind there's like aggression, there's there's anger, there's whatever. So I kind of swung from that being defensive and or responding defensively. When I was younger, I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of just rage. And that was all self-protection. I would lash out, and in some ways, right? If I lash out, I'm not going to get hurt. So that's kind of one extreme. And then, I sort of was like, okay, well, then if I play along and I'm going to tell people what they want to hear, it'll be a little bit better. And that didn't make me feel good. So it didn't make me feel good to be aggressive and angry and just respond. So now the pendulum's starting to swing, right? So it can go to the other extreme where I've just, like I said, been a people pleaser, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And yes, I'm happy to help you. And how can I, putting myself in a position where I'm exhausted all the time. The other thing is in between. So when I was in corporate America, which I was for many years, probably 30 years or whatever, I quickly realized that when you're honest and you stand your ground because you feel comfortable, and I think a lot of that comes from having some self-confidence and some self-assuredness. You reach a point in your life where you feel good, like I am confident in what I do, in my knowledge, in the way I present myself, that I know what I'm talking about. So when you're in a meeting with a bunch of dudes that are, running all over the place and I'm trying to outdo each other, you're calm, you're assured, you're direct, and you have the knowledge to back it up. You have the confidence to back it up without having an ego. I think if you can pull the ego out of it, because a lot of the male energy is all ego driven, then people are going to look at you and go, oh, that's a good suggestion. She does know what she's talking about. But if you don't say anything, you're never going to be heard. So I never was intimidated by my superiors at work. I have worked in a lot of male-dominated fields, and I never felt intimidated by them. I always felt more peer-like, where I saw other women shrinking. And it's funny because if women are powerful and women speak their mind and whatever, you know what they get called, right?
They're bitches.
Power hungry bitch leader.
She's a bitch, man.
Right.
I'm like, this is so not fair.
Right. And if a man is assertive, look at him, good for him. He's putting himself out there. So you got to find that in between where you're just being confident and knowledgeable and saying, I know my shit. And I'm backing up my shit with this,
Yep.
Presenting.
And I think it's also
down.
I also feel like we still keep fighting the stigmatism that's been placed upon us from our grandmother, great grandmothers, through all of our history. And we women doing such a good job moving forward, supporting each other, being stronger in our language, and don't let these name calling continue as without being called out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important part, that we're calling out when people calling us names, when they're calling us things that are inappropriate. And instead of being quiet, like so many of us have been in the past, and just swallow and stay mouse-like and say, no, I shouldn't rock the boat. Mm-hmm. That brings me to my final question. The SPARK stands for being strategic, purposeful, authentic, resilient, and knowledgeable. What does SPARK mean to you? Pick one. What would that be for you right now?
I would say it's authentic. As I talked about, the pendulum swinging from one side to the other. I also came out at the age of 17, as gay, and that was back in the 70s, and that was so I always knew that I was different when I was younger, and then I came out as a lesbian, and then I'm like, oh shoot, now I have to figure out how I fit into this this group of people. So I think I've always kind of struggled to figure out what my authentic self was. I was always unapologetic about it. But now that I'm older and wiser, you realize when you get to a certain age that when you're yourself, you find out who you are and find out at your core who you are. And horses did help me with that. Then you start to show up differently. You start to show up differently in relationships. You start to have a better understanding. And I always take things in. It's information, like the horses. I'm taking in information all the time. And the other thing that I learned from horses is that they may take in all this information, but they don't hold on to it and create some crazy story about it. We're really good at that as humans and women and whatever else. If something happens to us, we can spin quite a yarn. And we have a whole Rolodex of tapes that we can plug in. Oh, this is the appropriate story that goes along with that. So I've tried to be more of the horse, take information in, process it. How is it making me feel? Where is it showing up? How is it showing up in my relationships, in my work relationships? And then saying, okay, how do I want to show up? How do I want to take in this information and then let go of the stuff that I don't need? So all of that has really helped me be more authentic in my everyday life, and also very much happier and much lighter. I'm not burdened with a whole bunch of stuff. So I would say authenticity.
Once women stop playing the good girl, they don't move forward. They start over. New rules, new promises, this time will be different. And that's where things stall. In the next episode, I'm pulling apart that pattern and showing you what actually creates momentum in midlife. If you ever thought, I just need a fresh start, you do not want to miss this episode.